connecting the dots.
From Fayal to the world.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our second episode of Connecting the Dots. As you well know, I'm your host, Calvino Brum, and today we actually have two special guests. One of them is actually going to conduct this interview for today's episode, and that man will be my father, Fernando Brum. You might know him as well. He's very popular. um, and we figured, since this is a program that links up Portugal and the Azores, especially Fayal, of course, with the immigrant communities, obviously we needed a proper immigrant. I'm an immigrant. I came here when I was 2 years old, but my father has very larger luggage, if you may. And so I'd like to call him to the deck, and he'll present his guest and get going with this fantastic interview with an amazing guest that we had the opportunity to meet here in Fayal. I'll be listening closely, and of course, once again, Calvino Brum signing out and leaving you with our greatest voices for today's episode.
Okay, thank you for that introduction. And I will now try to give you a little background on our guest before I reveal his name. He and I go back to the 80s when we met here in Fayal. Of course, he was just a child back then. His father was the owner of restaurants here on the island. And so that played a little bit of a role in what he's doing today in the romantic, mythical city of San Francisco by the Bay. And he owns and operates the restaurant Uma Casa, which is a multicultural cuisine, but with emphasis on the Portuguese cuisine, which he is very well connected to. The gentleman that I am talking about was born in Hayward, California, and spent a lot of his childhood here in Fayal, including playing for Angustias Athletic Club in the youth leagues, and then working at a restaurant with his father. I am talking about Antelmo Faria, or Chef Telmo. So we will start with how did you get involved in culinary? Obviously, you had to go to school for that.
Yeah, I think the school was just the kind of more formal process of me getting to where I wanted to go and kind of pursue the passion and kind of the dreams that I've had for a long time, and I knew that I wanted to formalize that process. So I decided to go to culinary school, and it was almost a way of pushing myself to get to where I wanted to go, because I knew that if I took that route, then I was kind of committing to that. But way before that, I would say really my earliest influences did start here on the island of Fayal. As you mentioned, my dad in the early 90s opened a restaurant on the ground floor of the house where I grew up in Rua do Conceição, and the restaurant was called Adega Santa. Later, that restaurant ended up being leased out and becoming the space for a restaurant that had a very good reputation and a long run here in Fayal, Restaurant Árvore. But even before then, when I was like 4 years old, my dad did the summer exploração for the restaurant at Club Naval that they used to do, the one that's the little building next to Estalagem Santa Cruz. They used to rent that out in the summers.
And for the people that don't know Fayal, it was actually a fortress that defended the island many years ago, and now is a hotel.
Yeah,
But,
a very nice high-end hotel.
yeah, and it's got the vegetation on the outside of the walls. So it's an interesting building.
It's a very scenic setting. So the restaurant portion is adjacent to that building, but actually belongs to the Club Naval da Horta, and they used to rent that out to the highest bidders in the summers, and that person would have the right to operate a little cafe restaurant there for the season, which I think was about 4 months. And this was in the mid '80s, and it was very scenic, very multicultural. A lot of sailors and explorers from all over the world, and so he did that for a summer when I was 4 years old. And then, like I said, he went on to open Adega Santa. And at that time, I was older. And it was really during that time that he would take me to the Mercado, the open-air market in Conceição. And at the time, now it's become, the shop's a little bit more formalized. Mm-hmm. But at the time, in the middle of the Mercado was a lot of your... people that were coming from Pico on a daily basis with their fruit and produce. And then they're at where the Azores or where the Triângulo store is now that sells the Triangle Island products. That used to be the fishmonger. There used to be big marble tables full of ice and fish laid on the top.
Fresh fish daily.
Fresh fish daily. And there was 2 butchers, one on either side of the market. So when my dad always loved cooking, and before he had the restaurant,
that was like I'm sorry to have interrupted you, but it was prior to the supermarkets hitting Fayal. So that was really the place to go to get your fresh produce and products to operate your restaurant. And
yeah, absolutely. I remember when the first hipermercado came here, and this was before, you had mini mercados and the little corner stores where people in each neighborhood might sell kind of your basic necessities. But this was where you went for fresh produce, for fish, for the butcher shop, and that process. I would go with my dad, and we'd walk through it, and we'd see what was fresh and available. And I think that was the first kind of sense of me learning about food and seeing it from that perspective, and really taking an interest to it.
So then that developed your interest in the culinary arts, but what brought on the idea of Uma House? Because prior to that, you worked at Tacolicious and La Salette's, famous restaurants in the San Francisco Bay Area. So you had already a good base of knowledge, and you decided to open Uma Casa. Give me a little bit of how the name came about, why you implanted it in San Francisco, where the Portuguese community is virtually none nowadays. Although in the early 1900s there was a Portuguese community in that area, but now they've kind of moved away from there.
Yeah, so like I previously mentioned, the culinary school route was kind of a formalization of the process, and the process was that I had a dream. Once I decided I wanted to be a chef, my dream was always not to just be a chef and go work some fancy places and build a fancy resume. My dream was always to have a Portuguese restaurant, and to have a Portuguese restaurant in the Bay Area. And I knew that I wanted it to be contemporary. I knew I would see, these chefs, and I watched a lot of Food Network as a teenager, and Emerald and some of these early Food Network shows. And I always thought, wow, if somebody could do that with Portuguese food, with Azorean food, it would be so cool. So that was really from day one. That was my dream, was to have a Portuguese restaurant. I worked at La Salette for 3 years, and then my path kind of just serendipitously kind of got sidetracked, and I was in Monterey for a little bit, and I ended up getting my first executive chef job ever was at a Mexican restaurant in San Francisco, not Tacolicious, but coincidentally a few years later that led me to the path where I was executive chef for Tacolicious, a brand that grew really fast, really popular, took on a life of its own, opened a lot of doors for me. Super grateful in terms of not just learning how to build a business from the ground up, but a lot of connections that allowed me to get to the point where people had the confidence in me to where I could make the Uma Casa project come to life. I chose San Francisco because I was living in San Francisco. I loved it there. And I looked around, and San Francisco had one of the most dynamic food scenes in the country, and even globally, for relatively in actual, like, for a big city, San Francisco is really small. It's less than 1 million people, and it's 7 by 7 miles, so less than 50 square miles.
Yeah.
So in globally speaking, for a big, quote unquote, big city, San Francisco is actually
So in comparison
small.
to like
New
Paris
York
and New
or
York,
LA or
yeah,
Paris
yeah,
or Madrid,
yeah.
it's small.
but it
But it feels big.
But it's like you said, it's very diverse because you have the
Everything.
the Chinatown.
Oh yeah, Little Italy. You have
Little
you
Italy.
have Chinatown. You have Japantown.
So-
There's all this multiculturalism, and I looked around and I go, there's no representation for our culture. There's no Portuguese representation here, and that's kind of when I was determined to change that.
And what is that like for you to be sprinkling Portuguese culture and Azorian culture in that mix in San Francisco Bay Area, which a little bit later we'll discuss it a little bit in comparison to the Horta Bahia.
Yeah, I think for me, it was a great opportunity because I didn't feel kind of beholden to do it in the way that it had been traditionally done. And I think people ask me, why didn't you open in San Jose, or why didn't you open, in Santa Clara, somewhere like that? And I think I felt if I did it there, I would have had to do it how it had been done more traditionally. Like we had Sousa's restaurant there. So Lionel Sousa was a great chef, and he did Portuguese food in a very traditional way. And for me, the lure of San Francisco was that I kind of had a little bit more leeway in terms of my creativity and putting my own signature on a style of cuisine, and kind of being able to go outside the box a little bit and not only do traditional Portuguese food, which we do, but also kind of go outside of that and try new things, push some things forward, take a little bit of creative leeway with Portuguese cuisine.
So give me an example in how you've taken your knowledge of other foods from other cultures and you married it with the Portuguese culture, or vice versa.
I think one very simple one is like our arroz de marisco. Our arroz de marisco at Uma Casa is done with arborio rice, which is the traditional rice for risotto. Here in Portugal, in the Azores, traditionally it's done with the long grain rice. And I always liked that, but I always felt that the rice wasn't starchy enough, and the rice itself felt a little dry, and it would always leave the rice brothy, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But I always like the texture of risotto. I think it has a more luxurious mouthfeel. I think it's creamier. So I go, if I can do the same exact things that we do with arroz de marisco and incorporate the same flavors, but use arborio, I would get, in my opinion, a little bit more decadent version of the dish, a little bit more refined, a little bit more cosmopolitan. So that's one version. Another one I do, which is not a dish that is very well known here, but in the mainland in continent, is arroz de pato, which is a duck rice, and that's traditionally a dish where duck is cooked with rice in a wood oven with chorizo, and it's normally cooked all together. Not quite like a paella, but similar. And one thing we did was I kind of deconstructed that, and I took the duck and I cooked it with the risotto, and then I formed it into a croquette, and then we deep fry that, and then we take the duck breast, the magret, and we smoke it, and then we slice it really thin and put it over the croquette, and then we incorporate some other elements like a ruby port wine, some dried cherries and things. So that was like a dish that I took a lot of creative license with, but was the essence of that dish, the idea of that dish, and reinterpreted in a way that I think made more sense to a little bit more contemporary diner, somebody who's a little bit more discerning in terms of their expectations in terms of something that's going to wow them a little bit more, as opposed to doing it in a really kind of more traditional rustic way.
And it's also a way. It's also a way to take, as you said, the traditional cuisine and bring it to, or give it an update, give it a new flavor, a new kind of electricity or sparks.
Yeah, it's also a way as a creative to challenge yourself, because I think one of the things that I was drawn to this profession was that I would get to be creative. And I think as a creative, you always want to express yourself. So for me, it was always important that Uma Casa felt Portuguese in its essence and its heart and soul, that you would walk in and you would know instantly that you were in a Portuguese house.
I've seen the pictures that you've posted on your page, and definitely when I look at it, there's a lot of Portuguese culture in it. I also know that you have quite a full calendar of entertainment, Portuguese entertainment, fados and pictures of Amalia on the wall and all that sort of thing. So maybe you can give us a little description from your own words of the inside of your restaurant.
So Uma Casa, I wanted Uma Casa to feel authentic, but not authentic in a Walt Disney cliche kind of way. I didn't want it to be the fishing nets on the wall and just the shawls and things. I wanted it to feel really like a restaurant that you walked into and said, oh, this restaurant could be in the middle of Lisbon and it wouldn't be out of place and it would feel right. So my idea was to have it be very light and airy, which I think for me is what the Azores in Portugal feels like. A lot of the restaurant construction in San Francisco at the time was a lot of reclaimed wood and dark and those Edison light bulbs, very, very hipster in feel. And I wanted it to feel inviting and warm and have Portuguese tile in there and wood and a lot of lighter tones. It's painted in blue and white. Of course, I have it decorated with, some different things, but some scarves from some Portuguese soccer clubs and my collection of books and some Galos de Barcelos and a few things like that. But in general, even the photos that I chose for the restaurant were really cool. There's a local photographer, and she just had pictures of doors and windows from the Azores, which I think are some of the most unique and so cool. All different colors and tones, and some are wood and some are stone, and so that's what I kind of decided to put there. So also being in San Francisco, I wanted it to feel modern but feel Portuguese at the same time, and I think we were able to accomplish that.
Yeah, and the idea of like you spent good part of your life here near the ocean and so forth. Did that play a role in also choosing San Francisco as a home base and as a place to work professionally?
Yeah, absolutely. I've always felt most comfortable by the ocean. I think having that proximity to the ocean, nowhere ever in the world will feel like the Azores and Fayal specifically feels to me. And the smell of the places where I used to go fishing or swimming as a kid are so specific that when I'm there, I recognize that smell instantly, and it's like nowhere in the world. But being by the water is my preference. It makes me happy being able to listen, even if I have to take a short drive, to listen to the ocean, to smell the ocean. And I think doing Portuguese food and having lived in the Azores and Fayal, I think there's always a sense of comfort there and a sense of belonging for me, because it's an environment that's so natural to me that being near it is always something that for me I strive to
No,
to be near the coast.
And you obviously have lived most of your life in California, but yet you have this deep connection to the island of Fayal in particular, which is the place of birth of your father, and now you've brought your little son Rocky for the first time, I believe.
First time, yeah.
First time.
Well, he's been here before, but he wasn't in this world. He was still inside his mom's belly, but he had been here before, so I'm sure some of the sounds might be a little bit familiar.
So do you think that being here at the young age enabled you to savor the sounds, the smells, the flavors, and in that respect, it allows you to keep that connection live and well in deep inside you?
Yeah, I absolutely. I think when I look back on it, I feel truly lucky to have had the childhood that I had. Not only in terms of the community and the village that I had here in Fayal, in terms of friends and families and the culture and the freedoms and liberties that I had here. As a kid to play soccer, to ride bikes, to go to the beach, to fish, to spearfish, to a lot of different things that living here afforded me. Really, to this day, are an instrumental part of who I am. And my goal is that bringing my son here, even though I know he's really young, that one day he will feel a connection to this island in the same way that I feel, even though I wasn't born here. But of the influences of the island, I tell people all the time, and it's hard to explain, there's nowhere in the world that I feel more grounded in a connection to this actual planet that we live on than when I'm here in Fayal. The draw to the earth is stronger here for me than I've ever felt anywhere else. Now, I don't know if I think the Azores are a very special place in general. I think being in the middle, the isolation in the middle of the Atlantic, I think it's the same way as why Hawaii,
Yeah.
or Samoa or some of those places are really special. I think the remoteness created a culture that's unique but I also think there's this special draw here from the earth that really makes me just feel more comfortable than I am anywhere else.
Yeah, and your wife,
Jessie, yeah.
she seems to really enjoy being here.
Oh, she loves it here, yeah.
So she was born in California and doesn't really have the family connections that you have. but now with your son and everything, a couple more trips, and he'll be a full-fledged Faialense.
Yeah, I mean that's really the goal. The goal is that we can return here, and if not every summer, as much as possible, and that he'll grow up knowing where his ancestors came from, where his father was raised, where his grandfather was raised, sharing some of those same experiences, sharing some of that same community, creating some of those memories for himself. In regards to my wife, she loves it here. This is her third time here, and we've also shared some very special moments here. The first time here, we got engaged. The last time she was here, she was expecting our son, and now she's here. Our first kind of big trip as a family with our son, who's almost a year old now. So I think this place for her, and she sees me when I'm here, and sees how connected I am, and I think that realizing that this will be a place that's special for our family for years and years to come.
No, definitely. It seems that your roots are definitely well embedded in the basalt rocks of these islands, and you have a very special project that you started last year, which is a culinary tour of the islands, where you cooked in some of the local restaurants, and you had people experience the food. And one very special friend from your soccer days as a child in San Miguel, that must have been interesting to cook at his restaurant.
That was really cool because I hadn't seen Bruno. I hadn't seen Bruno in almost 30 years, and Brun Cosme, and his father also owned a restaurant, and we were friends, and we played soccer together. Both of our fathers owned restaurants. We were very good friends, and life takes you in different directions, and we were able to come back together last year. But the project you were talking about is I've paired with a company that's based out of Boston, Tour Azores, which is a great company. They have all the infrastructure, the boots on the ground. They do the travel booking, the hotels, basically the tours, the tour guides, the transfers to the airports. They handle all the logistics. They're great. They have a great infrastructure, great network. And then where I come in is I partner with them, and I basically curate the gastronomy part of it. And it was really just born out of, once again, my passion for the Azores, my passion for sharing that with people. And I looked at people traveling all over the world for these culinary experiences, people that go to Tuscany in Italy, people that go to Provence in France, people that go to San Sebastian in Spain, people that go to Napa Valley to eat and to drink wine and to learn more about those areas and their regional specialties. And people are even doing it in the mainland and to Madeira. And I really just saw an opportunity to introduce people to what I think is so special about the Azores, especially from a culinary standpoint, and to get the opportunity to, at least from the food perspective, to be an ambassador for not only Fayal but the rest of the island. So last year was the inaugural tour. We did Fayal, Peak, Terceira, São Miguel. This year, I really wanted to focus on the Triângulo, the Triangle Islands, a little bit more. To kind of do a deeper dive in Pico, which I think Pico is always been such a strong source or center of all things culinary here in the Azores. So much tradition there, and then also to go into São Jorge, which I think is an undiscovered gem still in a lot of ways, and in terms of what they offer from a gastronomic or a culinary standpoint. I mean, they're the northernmost, I believe, northernmost coffee plantation in the world. There's a micro coffee plantation in one of the Fajanges there. A cheese that is cheese that is world renowned, not only here in Continente, but all over the world. Queijo São Jorge is globally recognized for its quality. They're also the only place where here in the Azores where clams are farmed. They have clams, and then they also, have their unique style of cuisine there. My mom's from Saint George, so there's also that connection. So I really wanted to give the group an insight into these very specific islands.
And just so for those people who don't know, your father, obviously you taken your name from your father. His name was Telmo Faria, but he was better known as Tony Faria.
Yep.
And your mother is Dacia Faria, who still lives in California,
Yep.
and so forth. I did a little bit of research when I got wind of your project. And I wasn't able to find anywhere where there was such a tour focusing on our gastronomy, and specifically with a chef leading the way and explaining and really elaborating on the foods that people were tasting and the wines and that sort of thing. I understand in about a couple of weeks you're going to start your second tour, and that you were talking about the three islands, diving into the three islands of Pico, Faial, and São Jorge. Despite the proximity, they have all very unique traditions, and so that's going to be interesting. Do you want to reveal anything about some of the things that you're going to do?
Yeah, so I think the goal for my tours is always, like I said, I very hands-on in curating the experiences of the tour. There is some kind of your traditional tours where we go around the island and we do the Vulcão dos Capelins and things like that, because I think those are part of the history and the story of the island, and I think people should see that. But my goal is to offer experiences that are not only special and here to the region, but also unique. I don't want to just be your kind of standard run-of-the-mill tour. So, for example, one of the experiences here in Faial is we're going Fazenda Granja in Feiteira, which is a young couple that has come here, and they're growing a bunch of different produce and fruits and vegetables. And Manny, who is the chef, he had worked in the United States before, and he's very talented, and he's doing this amazing food with local ingredients that people haven't had an opportunity to savor. So we're going to go there, and we're going to do a collaborative dinner with them.
So just to a little caveat, that was actually the first guest on Connecting the Dots.
Oh, fantastic.
So that's interesting that because their goal is much the same, is to introduce culinary experiences to different people and bringing people together and really savoring the food and establishing friendships and that.
Yeah, and we're gonna go visit Adega do Vulcão, which is a not just producing wine here in Faial, but producing award-winning wines. One of their wines, one of my favorite wines, Ameixambar, which is actually made from grapes grown in sandy volcanic soil in Capelins, Varador area, and mixed with grapes from Criação Velha and Pico, which makes a great wine. So we're gonna go there.
They also make Rola Pipa.
Yeah.
And Rola Pipa has an interesting story. When I first heard of the name, I wondered, why would they name it that? But if on your tour you happen to go to a place like Cachorro in Pico, there's a very, very narrow kind of like ramp into the ocean, and so they would roll the wine barrels down that ramp into the water, and then they would lift them onto the boat.
Yeah.
And so there you go. The Rola Pipa is exactly the term explaining that tradition.
And it's so these are things that I think are projects that people are doing here that are important for the continued growth of the island. These projects, We also do we go to the market and we do a tour of the market, and we visit the Triangle store, and people have an opportunity to taste and purchase regional products. One of the things we're doing in Pico is we're doing a kind of a traditional picnic with the Pico cheeses and jams and morcella and linguiça and a lot of the pão de milho, bold meal things that
Inhamos.
cooks,
Cooks.
as they call them in Pico.
Cooks é nos cedros. Aqui no pé.
But then also we're going to grill some meat from a project from Azores Wagyu Company, which was started from a gentleman that was from California, came back to Pico, Roberto Lin, and he's doing a project there where they're growing Wagyu cattle on the island of Pico. So there's all these interesting projects and different things. Like I mentioned, the coffee plantation in St. George, and these are all things that people that are passionate about are creating this, and I want to bring people here and share those projects and that passion and the spirit of the Azores with our guests.
And so if you work things right with Roberto Lino, there'll probably be plenty of music, like that he will play some music for you. Anyway, so then that's another interesting project that you've just let us know about, which I hadn't heard about that project. And then in St. George, obviously, the clams have to be on the plate somewhere.
Yeah, so we're gonna go see where the clams come from. We're gonna taste the clams. We're gonna go do a tour. We're gonna do a tour of the cheese factory. We're going to go to the coffee plantation, see the coffee where it's grown in the fajaj, the way they process it, they roast it there themselves, which is really super cool. We're going to do they're going to get to do an espèce making class, which is a traditional Saint George pastry, which is very, very unique to Saint George. That's not really, you might see it here and there on another island, but the espèce is a Saint George specialty. And then we're going to go to the Santa Catarina tuna factory, which I think their tuna's some of the canned tuna. I think it doesn't get better than that. We used to have a tuna factory here in Fayal a long time ago.
We used to have it in about every island. So,
yeah, so it's since then closed down, but Santa Catarina is still doing it, and I like what they've done, and they've gone outside the box and they've adapted to modern days. So now they can their tuna with herbs, oregano, or lemon, or even ginger, and all these different things, because they said, hey, we need to adapt, or we need to progress what this traditional thing we're doing into modern times. So I love that when there's a conservation and a preservation of something that is traditional, but that people aren't afraid to push it forward a little bit and keep it exciting.
Now, do you think that there's enough of these interesting and unique ideas around the islands that can keep your project going for a long run?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's new and exciting things, and also, the tours is usually new guests. So I think. I think with each tour we'll do, we can build more relationships, have a better infrastructure, and able to introduce people to more and more unique experiences. But I think these experiences, people are going to continue to get better at what they do and their craft. So when we come, we'll be able to see their growth as well, and that's exciting. And the islands are really, there's so much potential, not just in the islands we've already visited, but the opportunity to go to islands like Flores and Santa Maria and Graciosa and or even go to do a tour where we go to Terceira for a longer period of time and explore it a little bit more in depth. So I think there's always different opportunities to to expand on what we're doing, to take a different approach. But I'm very excited about it. We've had, we have a good group coming this year. We already have a lot of people express interest for doing tours next year. I have people that want to do a tour specific for their group. So somebody approached me and said, hey, if we have 12 people, can we put together an itinerary for us? Sure, let's do that. So I think.
So are the groups relatively small, or?
Yeah, so the groups are about 12 to 16 people in size, and this is because we want to give personal attention. And also the experiences we offer, like the Fazenda Granja and some of these, they can't accommodate large groups of a bus of 30 or 40 people. These are unique, bespoke experiences that are uniquely curated, and some of them are on a micro level of what they're doing. So so some of these experiences can really only accommodate 12, 14 people. And it allows me to give personal attention to the group, allows me to share my stories with them, and it also allows us to keep doing these unique experiences that can't be recreated on a large scale. So the goal here for these tours is quality over quantity.
Well, I want to thank you very much for interrupting your vacation to
Not at all.
chat with us
This
here.
is long overdue. I know we've been trying to get something on the
That's
books
true.
for a while.
That's
so.
true. And we finally did it, and it's been a real pleasure. I hope that our audience enjoys a little bit of the flavor that we tried to sprinkle all along this conversation and some of the projects that you have in the future, and that they can visit Uma Casa if they can't visit the Azores, at least they can visit Uma Casa in San Francisco.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody's wants to get more information or follow up about the tours, you can look up Tour Azores. They're based out of Boston. Uma Casa is umacasarestaurant.com. We're based in San Francisco, California. Me personally, you can find me on Facebook, Telmo Faria, or on Instagram at Chef Telmo Faria. I'd be happy to answer questions for anybody. I often get many requests for recommendations, not just in the Azores, but in Lisbon and Porto, which I'm always happy to share. And it's always just great having an opportunity to connect with people, whether they're born here or there, but anybody that wants to and desires to have a connection to Fayal, the Azores, or Portugal in general. I'm always happy to share as much knowledge as I personally have with anybody that's interested. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Well, folks, that was the end of our second episode of Connecting the Dots. It was a really exuberating experience that I'm happy to share with all of you. And me and my father will keep trying to connect these dots in the middle of the Atlantic back to you. And so, wherever you're at, take care, and we'll catch you on the next episode.